Mark Reynolds, Liam O'Connor and Sophia Diaz seemed like ordinary Liverpool residents. But behind closed doors, they ran one of the most sophisticated cocaine empires the city had ever seen. An operation worth millions hidden in plain sight and untouchable until now. Liverpool had always been a city of contrasts. Its bustling waterfront, historic buildings, and passionate football fans painted a picture of life in full color. But beneath the surface, something darker was stirring. Most residents never saw it. They didn't know that behind the shiny facades of new developments and luxury apartments, a shadow had taken hold of the city. It was quiet, organized, and invisible to anyone who didn't know what to look for. This shadow was a multi-million-pound cocaine gang. A network so sophisticated that it seemed untouchable. The gang didn't operate like petty criminals. They moved with precision, planning every step of their operations in advance. Their shipments didn't arrive in public view, hidden instead in unsuspecting vehicles and warehouses that blended into the city's industrial zones. Couriers worked tirelessly, often under the cover of night, ferrying kilos of high-grade cocaine across Liverpool and beyond. Money flowed through the system in ways that were almost impossible to trace, laundered through shell companies, luxury property purchases, and even small businesses that appeared legitimate on the surface. For years they remained undetected. Locals noticed the sudden appearance of expensive cars and lavish lifestyles, but assumed these were just lucky entrepreneurs or footballers, spending their fortunes. No one suspected that the glittering exterior masked a criminal empire worth millions. The gang's leaders were careful to maintain low profiles, meeting in private homes or rented offices far from the public eye. Every member had a role, from those handling the drugs to those managing the finances. Communication was coded, and every move was calculated. The gang's ability to remain unseen made them a mystery even to law enforcement, a puzzle that seemed impossible to solve. Yet, tension was building beneath the surface. Rival gangs had noticed the newcomers in Liverpool, the ones whose influence grew seemingly overnight. In certain neighborhoods, whispers spread of unusual deliveries and unexpected violence. Even within the gang, pressure was mounting. Expanding an empire of this size required risk, and risk meant mistakes were inevitable. One wrong move could alert the authorities or provoke rivals. Still, the gang operated as if protected by a shield of invisibility, confident that their careful planning would keep them safe. Liverpool's docks, which had once been symbols of trade and commerce, had become a hidden highway for cocaine smuggling. Containers arrived and left with meticulous precision, often indistinguishable from the legitimate goods that flowed in and out of the city. Only those who knew what to look for could detect the patterns. Repeated shipments arriving at odd hours, certain truck routes used repeatedly, and a network of warehouses that seemed to have no official purpose. Observers on the outside would have seen nothing suspicious. To them, the city appeared calm, normal, vibrant. But inside the gang's network, a massive operation hummed like a hidden engine, powering a fortune built on secrecy and fear. For now, the authorities had only glimpses of the operation, fragments of intelligence that hinted at the scale of what they were dealing with. But even from these fragments, it was clear that this gang was different from anything Liverpool had seen before. They weren't reckless. They were disciplined, strategic, and ruthless. Any attempt to interfere could have catastrophic consequences. And so, for a time, the gang seemed untouchable. Life in Liverpool carried on above them, unaware of the shadow slowly extending over the city, a shadow that would eventually catch the attention of law enforcement in ways no one could have predicted. The breakthrough came when no one expected it. What started as a routine traffic stop on the outskirts of Liverpool would turn into the key that unraveled the gang's carefully constructed empire. A seemingly ordinary vehicle, a van with no distinguishing features, had been pulled over by local officers. Inside, hidden beneath crates of everyday goods, was an amount of high-grade cocaine that stunned investigators. It wasn't just the quantity that shocked them, it was the precision, the care with which it had been concealed. Whoever had arranged this shipment had thought of every detail, as if anticipating the possibility of being caught. This seizure became the first concrete evidence that the gang existed on a scale far larger than anyone had imagined. For years, there had been whispers, rumors of rapid wealth, expensive cars and luxury homes, but nothing concrete to link them to organized crime. Suddenly, the fragments that law enforcement had collected over months, sometimes years, began to form a picture. Every courier they had followed, every suspicious shipment, and every coded message now fell into. The gang wasn't just operating in Liverpool, it was part of a larger, highly organized network that stretched across the country and beyond. From that point, the investigation escalated rapidly. Surveillance teams were deployed around the clock, following delivery vans, tracing financial transactions, and monitoring suspected safe houses. Investigators discovered a network of warehouses strategically scattered across the city. Each warehouse served a purpose. Some stored the cocaine before it was distributed, others were fronts for laundering money, and a few were dead drops for courier exchanges. The gang's precision was almost military in nature. Shipments were timed to the second, routes meticulously planned, and communication carried out through encrypted apps and disposable phones. Any slip could be catastrophic, but up to this point they had been flawless. Yet even the most disciplined operations are not immune to mistakes. The gang had grown bold, confident in their invisibility. Small errors began to appear, missed signals, overlooked cameras, and discrepancies in delivery schedules. Each mistake was a thread that law enforcement could pull, unraveling part of the network. Investigators traced shipments from the docks, watching as crates were loaded into trucks and transported to nondescript warehouses. They noted the same faces repeatedly, each linked to multiple aspects of the operation. Slowly, the pieces were coming together. What had once been whispers and suspicions became a tangible blueprint of criminal enterprise. The scale of the operation was staggering. Authorities calculated that the gang was moving tens of millions of pounds worth of cocaine every year. The profits were vast, and the gang's lifestyle reflected it. Luxury vehicles, designer clothing, overseas vacations, and high-end properties throughout Liverpool and Europe. But these displays of wealth were not just indulgence, they were symbols of power, warnings to rivals, and evidence of the gang's reach. Every street, every district seemed to hide a part of their influence, and yet they remained invisible to most. Still, despite their meticulous planning, the gang could not escape the law forever. The traffic stop, an event that could have seemed insignificant at the time, became the domino that started a cascade of discoveries. Investigators realized that catching the gang would require patience, strategy, and a willingness to exploit every minor error. And in that moment, the first real cracks began to appear in an empire that had once seemed untouchable. Liverpool was about to witness a criminal investigation like no other. One that would expose a hidden world of danger, greed, and ambition hiding in plain sight. Inside the gang's empire, everything was calculated. Every member had a role, every move was deliberate, and every transaction was meticulously planned. The gang functioned like a small, secretive corporation. Couriers transported cocaine across Liverpool and into neighboring cities, often using routes so routine that they blended perfectly with daily traffic. Enforcers ensured that shipments arrived on time and that rivals or traders were kept at bay, sometimes with violence, sometimes with intimidation. Accountants managed millions of pounds, moving money through shell companies, foreign bank accounts, and front businesses, all designed to make tracing impossible. Even the technology team played a crucial role, developing encrypted communication methods and monitoring law enforcement patterns. Each layer of the operation was precise, and together they formed an almost invisible network that spanned the city. Luxury properties and flashy cars were only the tip of the iceberg. On the surface, these displayed wealth, but behind closed doors, warehouses and hidden storage units told the true story of the gang's scale. Inside, cocaine was sorted, packaged and prepared for distribution with surgical precision. The packaging itself was a mark of professionalism. No traces, no fingerprints, no evidence left behind. Investigators would later be amazed at how methodical it all was, as if the gang had studied every criminal case and learned from the mistakes of others. This was not just crime, it was business, and Liverpool had become a key node in a network that stretched across Europe and even beyond. Despite the sophistication, tension was building inside the group. The pressure of handling millions of pounds worth of cocaine and cash was immense. Disputes over shipments, disagreements over loyalty, and personal greed created fractures. Investigators later learned that these cracks were critical. One insider, feeling slighted or fearful, began secretly passing fragments of information to the authorities. Each revelation, small on its own, gradually exposed the inner workings of the empire. Surveillance footage was matched with financial trails, shipment schedules, and phone records, revealing a shocking level of organization. Liverpool was no longer just a base of operations. It was a hub connecting suppliers overseas to dealers across the UK. The gang's reach was also international. Through connections with suppliers in South America and distributors across Europe, Liverpool became more than a city. It became a hub of global drug trafficking. Investigators discovered that the gang had established reliable supply lines, ensuring that shipments arrived on schedule, regardless of border controls or law enforcement pressure. The cocaine was of the highest quality, commanding enormous prices and creating a dangerous cycle of wealth and influence. For the gang, mistakes were costly, not only financially but in terms of power and reputation. For law enforcement pressure, the cocaine was of the highest quality, commanding enormous prices and creating a dangerous cycle of wealth and influence. For the gang, mistakes were costly, not only financially but in terms of power and reputation. For law enforcement, catching them would require patience and a careful understanding of a system built to withstand scrutiny. What investigators uncovered was chilling. Every detail of the gang's operation, from the smallest courier to the senior leaders, was intertwined. A single misstep could unravel months of planning, and yet the gang continued to operate confidently, almost arrogantly, as if protected by an unseen shield. But every empire has its vulnerabilities. Greed, fear, and ambition create weaknesses, and the insider's information was enough to begin exploiting them. Little by little, what had once been an invisible network began to take shape in the minds of law enforcement. They now knew the faces, the names, the routes, and the method. Liverpool's shadow empire, once untouchable, was beginning to crumble from within. And yet, even as the investigation advanced, the gang remained dangerous. Their reach extended into neighborhoods, social circles, and businesses that had no connection to the law but were under the gang's influence. Each arrest, each seizure, would not only impact the gang, but also ripple across the city in unexpected ways. The authorities had a blueprint of an empire that had hidden in plain sight. But dismantling it would require precision, patience, and courage. Liverpool's streets, once quietly ruled from the shadows, were about to witness a confrontation that would shake the underworld to its core. The fall of the gang was sudden, yet years in the making. Law enforcement had pieced together enough evidence to plan an operation that would strike at the heart of the empire. For months, investigators had studied the gang's routines, movements, and habits. Every delivery route, every safe house, and every key member had been mapped. The moment to act had finally arrived. Early one morning, before the city had fully awakened, officers moved in. The operation was coordinated with precision, mirroring the efficiency of the gang itself. Raids unfolded across Liverpool in a blur of activity. Luxury homes, once symbols of untouchable wealth, were surrounded. Hidden warehouses, long used for storage and distribution, were emptied. The sheer scale of the operation left the public stunned. Millions of pounds in cash were seized, alongside high-grade cocaine, vehicles, and hidden electronic devices. The authorities had struck a blow to the gang's infrastructure that could cripple it for years. Yet even as arrests were made and evidence collected, the full story of the gang's empire began to emerge. The senior leaders, the ones who had orchestrated the network from behind closed doors, were captured in a series of carefully executed raids. Some were found in opulent apartments, others in rented safe houses far from prying eyes. Each arrest revealed another layer of the operation: encrypted phones, detailed accounts of shipments, and financial ledgers that documented the staggering scale of their business. But the most shocking discovery came unexpectedly. In the chaos of the raids, authorities found evidence of a senior figure who had vanished. No one knew exactly where he had gone, but the digital traces he left behind suggested he had prepared for escape long in advance. The vanished figure left behind a trove of encrypted devices, the contents of which held secrets capable of reopening investigations around the world. Investigators realized that even dismantled, the gang had not disappeared entirely. Connections in Europe, South America, and other parts of the UK hinted at hidden shipments and accomplices who had remained undetected. The operation that had seemed like a decisive victory now revealed new challenges. Liverpool's underworld was resilient, and the ghost of the gang's influence lingered in shadows where law enforcement could not yet reach. As the days unfolded, the scale of the gang's impact became clearer. Communities once plagued by fear and violence began to speak about the changes. Businesses previously under threat from extortion could finally operate without intimidation. Streets that had been quieted by the presence of enforcers were now open to normal life again. Yet the story was not simple. The gang's disappearance left gaps in the city's underworld, and rival factions moved quickly to fill them. Law enforcement had won a battle, but the war against organized crime remained ongoing. What made the fall of the gang particularly remarkable was the sophistication with which they had operated for years. Their empire had been built on secrecy, loyalty, and ruthless discipline. Every shipment, every transaction, and every courier had been carefully managed to avoid detection. And yet, even the most disciplined organization has vulnerabilities. Human error, greed, and fear can crack even the strongest systems. And in this case, a single insider provided the key to the entire operation. That human flaw, combined with meticulous police work, brought down a network that had seemed untouchable. Liverpool would never forget the shock of the raids. The images of seized cash, drugs, and vehicles made headlines while the story behind the arrests slowly emerged through court reports and investigations. The gang, once untouchable and operating in plain sight, had been dismantled, but the hidden networks they had established were a chilling reminder of how deep organized crime could run. Law enforcement had won a major victory, but the hunt for the missing figure and the remnants of the network continued. The city, relieved yet wary, understood that while one empire had fallen, the shadows of crime always linger, waiting for the next opportunity to rise. The courtroom became the final stage of the saga, where the shadowy empire of the gang was exposed in full. For months, prosecutors presented evidence collected from the raids, surveillance, and insider testimonies. The sheer volume was overwhelming. Millions of pounds in cash, tons of high-grade cocaine, encrypted devices, and detailed ledgers that outlined years of meticulous criminal activity. Every arrest and seizure told a story, each revealing how a group of individuals had managed to control a vast network while remaining almost invisible to the city they inhabited. The leaders of the gang faced decades behind bars. Judges described their operations as ruthless, sophisticated, and extraordinarily dangerous. The court heard how they had built an empire not just in Liverpool but with connections stretching across Europe and beyond. Members who cooperated with authorities received lighter sentences, their testimonies critical in unraveling the final threads of the network. Yet even as justice was served in the courtroom, there were echoes of the gang's lingering influence. Communities that had once been terrorized by intimidation and violence slowly began to heal, but the scars remained. For ordinary residents of Liverpool, the impact of the gang's fall was tangible. Streets that had been controlled through fear now felt safer. Small businesses could operate without the threat of extortion, and local law enforcement gained a renewed sense of confidence in tackling organized crime. The docks, once a silent highway for smuggled cocaine, returned to legitimate commerce, and the city could finally breathe without the constant shadow of a criminal empire. Yet, the story left a lingering unease. How could such a sophisticated network operate unnoticed for so long? And what else might be hidden in the shadows waiting to rise? The hunt for the missing senior figure continued even after the courtroom drama concluded. Investigators believed that despite the arrests and seizures, the gang's influence had not been entirely eradicated. Encrypted devices, offshore accounts and foreign contacts hinted at a network still capable of operating at a smaller scale. Liverpool had witnessed a major victory against organized crime, but authorities remained vigilant, knowing that dismantling one empire did not guarantee the end of criminal activity. In many ways, the story served as a warning. The shadow of organized crime never fully disappears. It only retreats until another opportunity presents itself. The case also became a lesson in strategy, patience, and persistence for law enforcement. Months of observation, careful surveillance, and painstaking collection of evidence had been required to bring the gang down. It demonstrated how even the most sophisticated criminal organizations are vulnerable to human error, and how insider information can become the turning point in unraveling a secretive network. The fall of the gang was not only a story of crime and punishment, but also a testament to the determination of investigators who refused to be outmaneuvered. Liverpool, a city steeped in history, culture, and resilience, slowly returned to normalcy. Yet, for those who had been directly affected, the memories remained. Families who had lived in fear, neighborhoods that had been under the gang's silent control, and the authorities who had risked everything to dismantle the network all carried the weight of what had occurred. The story of the multi-million-pound cocaine gang became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the hidden dangers that can exist beneath the surface of any city. In the end, justice had been served, but the shadows lingered. The dismantling of the gang brought relief and closure, yet also awareness that organized crime is adaptive, patient, and always ready to fill gaps left behind. Liverpool had survived a storm that had threatened its streets, its communities, and its peace. The empire had fallen, but the story left a lasting mark, a warning that vigilance is never optional, and that even in a city alive with color and life, shadows can stretch further than anyone imagines.